Okay, so we are now streaming live on YouTube. We are now streaming live on YouTube. So for those who are unable to join our Zoom session, you may go to YouTube and search for PMAP Cebu. You can watch the live stream of this afternoon's webinar there. So again, we have a lot of guests from the academe. Thank you so much for joining us. No, and also of course, especially our PMAP Cebu members. Thank you for joining us once again on this afternoon's webinar. We now have 62 participants joining us. Okay, thank you so much for joining us for this afternoon's webinar. Okay, so may we request everyone to please observe some silence so that we can have our prayer. much, everyone. So, everyone, may I request everyone to please settle down, and I'd like to request if we can um, rewind the video for a while. We'd like to, of course, welcome everyone, no, to this afternoon's webinar with this, which is our crisis management and post-quarantine preparations. This is in partnership with IntelliCare and AON. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. We are now 93 participants, and welcome everyone, especially to our PMAP Cebu members and our guests. So friends, just to properly welcome all of us, I'd like to share a very special premiere this afternoon for all of you. This is the premiere of the PMAP Cebu webinar sessions video. Okay, so there you have it, guys. Our PMAP Cebu webinar sessions video premiere. So I hope you liked the video. So thank you so much, Miss Pinky Mate, our IDP, for preparing that video for all of us. So again, welcome to this exclusive webinar on crisis management and post-quarantine preparations in partnership with IntelliCare and AON. Okay, so right now, of course, as we prepare for our re-entry plans,
the challenges of life demand that we measure up, and that's a fact. And
we'd like to give a time to our sponsors.
the challenges of life demand that we measure up, and that's a fact IntelliCare understands and takes seriously. IntelliCare understands that the cycle of healthcare begins when you're healthy. Because we see the big picture and approach healthcare holistically, we make it possible for you to stay well, prevent illness, or catch it early on. It assures you that when you do need it, professional medical care and treatment will be available. So you can take comfort in the fact that we're managing the resources and cost of quality healthcare. Technology makes it possible for us to serve a wider base of customers online, day and night, so that we can focus on improving the numbers that really matter to us. The numbers that track your health, that drive down the cost of quality healthcare, that show you're in the best of health, so that you can strike a healthy balance in life. A balance that's critical and necessary for a life well lived, something we recognize and fully understand.
We are the leader in healthcare management because of a delicate balance we've achieved through the years. We're grounded on our core value of compassion, yet daring enough to make groundbreaking changes. We take pride in the tradition of excellence, yet always open to innovation. We're anchored in our commitment to the Filipino people, yet unfettered as we reach out to serve them better. And why do we do this? Because we believe that good, quality healthcare isn't something one simply aspires for. It is a constitutional right as inalienable as any other basic human right.
IntelliCare, your intelligent health choice.
Wouldn't it be great if you could see the well-being of your entire workforce? Not just the physical, emotional, and social, but financial too. You could see if they were healthy and happy, or in need of a little help and support in some aspect of their lives. With Well One, you can. An app for employees and powerful data-driven insights for you. Well One comes to you from AON, your consultant and global advisor in risk, retirement, and health solutions. It combines data analytics, something we're good at, with people management, something you're good at. The data the app gets from each employee creates health scores based on their lifestyle, from how they rate their diet and the amount of exercise they do, to how they feel from a mental and even financial point of view. A few more money worries this month, or not getting enough sleep? They can read expert articles and get personalized coaching to better plan for today, tomorrow, and the future. Our team of experts, meanwhile, can use these data insights to deliver evidence-led health solutions that help boost productivity, reduce risk, and deliver on your strategy. These health scores, scientifically calculated numbers from 1 to 1,000, are based on many years of real-life clinical data and offer a clear overview of well-being. And you can see these anonymized, aggregate scores all in one place. You can even benchmark against other businesses in your sector. You can then support your staff through digital coaching, challenges and rewards, everything you need to help bring about sustainable, healthy behavior change across your workforce. According to our research, over 95% of employers recognize the link between employee health and performance. So you see, it's more than a return on investment, it's a return on health. The Well One app. Driven by data, powered by people. Ask your AON consultant for a demonstration of the app and more information. The Well One app from AON.
Okay, so to all our 111 participants, welcome and thank you for joining us. With the continually evolving COVID-19 outbreak, organizations are navigating a new normal in their operations, balancing the need to address business continuity plans while protecting the health and safety of their employees. So, in this session, we will focus on how the crisis has evolved so far, how best to manage or respond to these crises, and how to prepare ahead for the gradual exit from the enhanced community quarantine. Okay, so I'd like to introduce our speakers this afternoon. Okay, our speaker this afternoon is, of course, Mr. Is Dr. Andrew Sandoval, no? Our first speaker. Doc Andrew is part of the Health Solutions Group, no? Of AON. And he is also the medical director of AON. And also joining us later is Miss Chris Rosenthal. Uh, she is the business sector and leads the efforts related to human capital solutions in the Philippines. So she comes with the lens of HR practitioner and augments our health solutions consulting team with her HR expertise. So PMAP Cebu members and our guests, let's welcome Dr. Andrew Sandoval and Miss Chris Rosenthal.
Thank you for that introduction. Maayong hapon sa inyong tanan. Did I pronounce it right? I'm not that fluent in your dialect, but what I'm fond of is eating your delicious lechon. So thank you, the officers of PMAP Cebu, for inviting us on this webinar. Hope we can share to you valuable insights regarding the subject matter for today's afternoon's topic. So let's start. By this time, much has been heard about COVID-19. So instead of discussing the basic information about the virus and the disease causes, we'll focus directly on the impact, specifically to our world. I hope to start with a flashback when the World Health Organization declared the outbreak a pandemic last March 11. I should say that the implementation of enhanced community quarantine to control the spread of the infection proved to be the turning point that directly triggered the crisis here in the Philippines. Since the start of the lockdown, and I suppose it's quite later in Cebu, work has been disrupted as people are forced to work from home and on-site work is limited to skeletal forces. Maintaining smooth operations and adapting to the new work arrangement has become a real challenge for all of us. After more than 2 months since the start of the crisis, here we are, still coping to mitigate its effects. Despite the sudden change, we were able to regroup and implement our business continuity plans to cope with the situation. Then set timelines for lifting ECQ has been extended several times, and this is also true in Cebu. This might still be a moving target for all of us. So I was advised that in Cebu and Mandaue, ECQ is extended till end of the month. And in Mactan, there is the modified ECQ while the rest of the cities are in GCQ. Whatever it is, whether extended, modified, or general community quarantine, uncertainty remains. And as leaders of our respective companies, we are all figuring out how to exit this ECQ. Here in Manila, and I assume they're also in Cebu, most companies would rather execute a gradual exit and cautious return to worksite. Even after our return to our offices, the COVID-19 is here to stay, and no one can tell when that pandemic state will be lifted. Regardless, in coping with the new normal, we will continuously be preoccupied mainly with two things: containing the disease and managing the aftermath of the ECQ. On the disease containment, still the trust is to do close health risk monitoring, then triage or isolate when needed, then conduct targeted testing for employees who develop symptoms, send those confirmed cases for treatment, and then do diligent contact tracing. So there goes that four T's in the upper portion, that on the red. Otherwise, with the loosening up under modified ECQ, then GCQ, the danger of another wave happening is not a remote possibility. We were told that in Germany, South Korea, and other countries, and also Brazil, there was also already a second wave in those countries. Then simultaneously, we have to be in the drawing boards, protecting our workforce and reconfiguring our workplace, tweaking operations, adjusting our finances, and many more chores to manage the post-quarantine situation. So I would not go in detail with this deck, just presenting the basic definition of what a crisis is to take off moving forward in the discussion. Business-wise, there is no doubt that the crisis has threatened and impacted on our operations. Hence, we are compelled to perform crisis management. Interestingly, I would like to share a perspective on crisis echoed by a distinguished expert in organizational theory, that of treating it as a process rather than a mere event. According to her, adopting this perspective allows us to develop ways to anticipate crisis and mitigates its effect promptly. Though none of us has experienced a crisis of this magnitude, hence it is unprecedented, she strongly argues that the crisis did not come from out of nowhere. In our case, we have known for years that coronaviruses existed, having already experienced like SARS-CoV-1 and MERS-CoV outbreaks. A number of experts have also warned us of the possibility of a more devastating pandemic, such as the one we are now experiencing. The downside of approaching crisis management in the context of a crisis being merely an event lures us into thinking that it is something sudden, something coming from out of nowhere, that simply it happens and then we will eventually recover from it. Sadly, it's not as simple as that. Though easier said than done, organizations should always be operating with anticipation, prevention, and resilience as guiding principles. So, where are you in the COVID-19 spectrum? In which phase of the crisis management do you find yourselves now? I am sure that by this time, if not all of us, have somehow managed the situation. However, it is a must for us to figure out our next steps in dealing with this evolving crisis. I would like to share to you a model made by AON to manage this COVID-19 pandemic crisis. Historically, crisis events have typically unfolded with an event arc that includes identified start and stop dates. There's a start and there's a expected date of finish, followed by a period of recovery and return to normal. However, COVID-19's event arc is different, and we all know that as of this time. The arc is fluid and the disease will continue to be present until such time as a vaccine becomes available or a treatment protocol is found to be effective. Even if there's a vaccine already, maybe it will take another like several months or even a year before the vaccine will reach us. We do not know how much is the vaccine, how frequent we should be given with the vaccine. Is it as frequent as the flu vaccine? And every 5 years as the pneumonia vaccine, will the immunity provide us a lifetime immunity? So nobody can tell us right now. This model flexes with waves in the event arc and introduces the three mechanisms for business impact actions: short, mid, and long term, as you can see in the table there. By this time, all of us have responded to the crisis in our own ways and have implemented immediate actions to cope with the situation. Shortly, we have reacted and responded, and that's phase one. Then what is more challenging than the initial phase is the process of stabilizing our business, maintaining or regaining smooth operations, and addressing our people's needs and concerns. As COVID-19 continuously devastates the global economy, and this is a very, very true eventuality now, financial stability is most crucial during this time. Therefore, client retention should be a preoccupation. It's very important. Our business will not exist if we have no clients. That's understandable. Forecasts should be revisited and business plans tweaked accordingly. Otherwise, infusing capitals would be inevitable. So, to adapt to and address this new reality, we should be proactive in anticipating the future of our businesses. And in preparing our business for the post-pandemic world, it might help to be guided by this piece, 5 P's: position, plan, perspective, project, and preparedness. I will touch this one by one. In preparing your business for the post-pandemic world, it's crucial to make strategic decisions. You must understand your organization's position in your environment. Who are you in your market? Who are your main competitors? Can you shut down your operations and reopen unchanged after the pandemic? Can you regain lost ground? Will you be bankrupt, or will you emerge as a market leader fueled by developments during the lockdown? We hear of many firms that are questioning their viability post-pandemic. They are sort of being realistic, such as those in travels like airlines, hospitality like hotels, and events industries. On the other hand, we also hear of firms accelerating their growth because their value propositions are in high demand. Think of companies manufacturing health amenities like alcohol and surgical masks, and even home delivery services, Grab services for basic needs while ECQ is ongoing. As early as now, you should take steps to map your probable position when the pandemic ceases. What do you think of your own organization? I am sure you already have thought of that by now. Then, secondly, what are your plans? What are the things you need to do now to get through the crisis and go back to business when it ends? Thirdly, proper perspective is likewise crucial. How do you see the world around you in relation to your own organization? This crisis can bring people together and facilitate a collective spirit of endurance, but it can also push people apart with individuals distrusting one another and being solely concerned with looking after themselves. It is crucial to consider how your perspective might evolve. Will the ongoing situation bring your employees together or drive them apart? And the next thing that I will utter is very important. Will they see your organization differently when the crisis is over? Will your employees see you as a caring provider or otherwise? Next, what new projects will you embark on? The challenge is to prioritize and coordinate initiatives that will be beneficial to your organization. Finally, you need to assess your organization's preparedness. Are you ready for the projects that you have outlined? We see big differences in preparedness at the individual, team, and organizational level. The resources at hand, along with the speed and quality of decision-making processes, vary greatly. It is these differences that will determine who achieves and who falls short of success. So, applying the 5 Ps, you may refer to this worksheet to better concretize and plot your current and future action items. Did you notice that during these trying times, banks are giving 30 to 60-day extension periods for their clients' loan amortization and credit card payments and waiving late and finance charges? Because remember, and please bear in mind, your clients will remember how you reacted during this crisis. And you should know why these banks are doing what they're doing now. So the next few slides, the culprit being a medical condition, I will focus in my remaining slides on what lies ahead in the healthcare industry and how this pandemic in the long term will reshape health and what will be the priority developments in this area. I will go first with the technology. We will touch on the digitized health services that represent one of the largest potential areas of growth after the COVID-19 pandemic. Presently, we are already seeing the rebirth of telemedicine, and these virtual consultations will gain more importance in triaging care, sharing critical guidance, and providing emotional support. We would expect telemedicine to likewise cater to managing admitted and even ICU cases, even in developing countries. Social media and mobile applications will emerge as disseminators of public health information. It can be foreseen that these technologies will be used as tools to highlight high-risk areas where infections are most likely to occur. Now they are developing a mobile app that can even do contact tracing. In the area of critical care, in due time, a 3D printed device will be launched, providing a splitter gadget to allow a single ventilator to be shared by multiple patients. This will address our shortage in ventilator during this pandemic period. Though less than the personal touch of patient care, let's imagine it as of now, robots will possibly be here and there to assist medical workers in monitoring patients' temperatures, heart rates, and other vital signs, reducing human interactions and the risk of spreading the infection. Additionally, it would not be unusual to see unmanned aerial vehicles like drones being deployed to spray disinfectants, transport laboratory specimens, carry medical samples, or even conduct thermal or fever imaging tests. Lastly, more sophisticated electronic record-keeping applications will be available to monitor symptom checklists and track lab results. So, moving forward, there will be a substantial opportunity for producers of medical devices and hygiene products and other healthcare amenities. Expansion of health access by developing tasks will allow more basic services to be provided and availability of some prescription drugs over the counter. Equipping financial security with individual and public health will not be a hard sell anymore. Until such time that a vaccine is developed and massive immunization to COVID-19 is done, medical frontliners will continue to observe stringent wearing of PPEs. Hospitals and doctors will invest on it, but of course, this will be imputed in our cost of their services. Lastly, if world leaders will learn from this crisis, then there should be effective cross-border collective collaboration, shifting global health governance towards relevant and much-needed development goals. So, all this talk on crisis management boils down to one thing: Effective crisis management and post-quarantine preparations will only be possible if the people, both workforce and stakeholders, are committed to make it happen. The question is, have we done our part in making our people ready? Have we motivated them enough to embrace and cope with this new normal? Then I assure you that Chris can elaborate on that. Chris, take it away from here.
Yes, thank you, Doc Andrew. Allow me to just share my screen for a minute. Okay. You're seeing my screen, okay? All right, thank you, Doc Andrew. It's quite enlightening that you share about crisis management and organizations' preparedness to handle crisis. And it's actually quite interesting because the material that you shared isn't just pertinent to a pandemic situation, but any crisis for that matter. For the next part of our talk, we'll talk about preparedness. I'm sure a lot of organizations are in the process of doing that. And the question that we often get asked as consultants is how, and what would be some tips or advisory that we can share as we go through and help organizations throughout this process. But maybe before that, because I know we have over 100 participants in this webinar, different organizations might be going through different stages of managing the COVID crisis. And so allow me to just share this. We're going to have a poll for our participants. If I can ask the PMAP team to help with this poll. Thank you. And maybe we'll give our participants about 30 seconds to answer the question. So where are you on the COVID-19 spectrum? Are you managing the crisis? Are you concentrating on stabilizing the business? Or are you planning for the future? There's no right or wrong. I have to emphasize that. No copying answers either. No right or wrong. Of course, we totally understand different organizations belong to different industries and their priorities constantly change. So we're just doing this poll to see more or less where our audience is. Maybe we'll give you about 10 to 15 more seconds to answer. Only so far about 55 have answered. We have 102 participants that are supposed to be voting. Maybe about 5 more seconds. Okay, I think the votes are pretty steady. We can close the voting now. So it's interesting that of our participants, if you'll see the screen, actually, it's interesting that it's about even, no? 46% are managing the crisis, 43% are stabilizing the business, about 45% are actually planning for the future. So if I we'll stop the poll sharing right now. We'll proceed to the next slide. So that's actually quite interesting. So different organizations are pretty spread in terms of where they are in managing the pandemic. I wanted to share this slide. So AON conducted a pulse survey. And mind you, throughout this pandemic, throughout this crisis, we've already conducted 3 pulse surveys. So if you happen to be one of those that responded to our pulse survey, it's a very short survey. Thank you for your participation. If you have never participated in the past, I would highly encourage that you do, because you also get the data in return for your participation. So you can follow AON's LinkedIn page to see all our ads for any kind of pulse surveys relative to the pandemic. So this is a survey conducted across APAC. And we asked HR practitioners what are the main challenges that you're facing today, that HR practitioners are facing today in light of the pandemic, the COVID-19 outbreak? So mind you, this is a survey, the Pulse survey was released, this particular one in January. And it's interesting that at that time, um, even in the Philippines, we're thinking of BCP. We're only thinking of business continuity plans. And in APAC, other parts of APAC, we know that they were already deep in managing the pandemic. But again, the results I'm sharing here are shared for all of APAC. So top priorities are managing the business continuity plans, um, thinking and managing of flexible work arrangements, working from home, one of them, and then finally managing employee communication. If you look at the bottom, what's interesting to note is that HR practitioners at that time had limited understanding of pandemic exclusions in their insurance policies. And this is very, very important. I think as HR practitioners, we think, oh, it's the benefits people handling that. And yeah, who would have thought that we would have a pandemic that as maybe HR generalists or those in recruitment perhaps would even need to think about this. But this is very important, especially in light of today and lesson learned for the future. No? So it's not just being aware of certain exclusions in your contract, but also we found that the other challenge for HR practitioners is the inadequacy. They felt the inadequacy of medical coverages for their employees in light of COVID-19. So we'll come back to that later because these are actually also equally important aspects. And I'm almost sure that if we conducted the same survey and threw out this question again to HR practitioners, we're going to see a shift in the responses, and perhaps these would come out at the top compared to just managing business continuity. Focusing on the top three survey responses, we recommend, based on what we hear actually from our clients in managing business continuity, it's interesting that a lot of the HR clients that we have would say, we thought that our BCP or business continuity plans were so great, they were so thorough, they were so detailed, really excellent documentation on paper. But then when the pandemic was declared, lo and behold, they realized that there were so many gaps in their BCP plans. And that's why up until, about a month ago or 2 months ago, they're still trying to be fixing their BCP plans and managing throughout that. So take this opportunity to learn from that exercise, document the gaps that you have, ensure that you have action plans in place to address them, so that in the future, any kind of crisis, not just a pandemic, but any kind of crisis hits us, there is an opportunity to again go back to that much improved BCP plan. The other thing is that in managing flexible work arrangements and communication with employees, it's really very important to over communicate. But in terms of managing our workforce, to be fair, to set the expectations, but also remain flexible in understanding the uniqueness of their situations and any risk factors that they might be exposed to. When we look at the bottom of the list in terms of what HR practitioners shared as challenges, so this is, again, to refresh your memory, limited understanding of pandemic as an exclusion in their insurance programs, and then feeling the inadequacy of their medical coverages for their employees. So in taking a look at these, although they fared low, again, this is January, and if we survey today, this might be at the top. However, so in looking at these, how do we resolve? How do we look at the gaps? How do we ensure that this is equally important and prioritized? So we recommend the following: taking a look at your existing coverages, look at the plan designs, and really granularly look at the details and the wording that is included in your contracts. Leverage any kind of data that you can get from experts, from consultants in the benefits field who have rich databases, to look at benchmarks in terms of how other organizations are handling any inadequacies in their coverage, especially in light of the pandemic or other, even an epidemic or other such related issues. And then see how you can perhaps explore different alternative designs not just to include some coverage in the wording, but also perhaps to include a second layer if your organization can afford a second layer coverage for critical illnesses or dreaded diseases or pandemics. It's something that you can certainly take a look at. And then finally, conducting a thorough risk assessment, not just related to the pandemic, not just related to health insurance and people, but really a thorough risk assessment. So if you allow me to just share what is a risk assessment, I think sometimes we come across organizations that are very large, MNCs or multinational organizations, or even large conglomerates that have a risk management department and a chief risk officer. Other organizations may not have this function, or perhaps may not have an individual responsible for risk, and that's okay. Sometimes it is assigned or delegated to a CFO or a CHRO, but somebody at the C-suite level. So a risk assessment is actually very important because you're not just looking at people risks, but you're evaluating risks on many different facets that can impact on organization. And there are different kinds of ways of doing a risk assessment. There's a risk tolerance test that you can conduct, which essentially means the appetite of the organization to fathom or to have a buffer for such risks. There are different kinds of risk modeling exercises as well that can be had. And then in terms of these types of risk modeling exercises, there's risk quantification where even financial impact is assessed, not just top line revenue and bottom line, but all facets within your financial statements are looked at. So really quantifying different risks at every angle. And so why is it important to do a risk assessment outside of just the pandemic in managing the crisis, as Doc Andrew had shared? um, it essentially gives your leaders, your C-suite, a better understanding and a baseline of where you're at today. It helps the organization identify any gaps, any exposures. And then when you identify such gaps, it's important to create a framework to address them. So you don't just do a risk assessment and park it, but you definitely conduct the risk assessment and determine the gaps, and then determine possible actions to address them. That's very, very important. And again, pandemic, any other kind of crisis, whether it be calamity related, natural calamity related, or even political, geopolitical violence or issues. So there are many different risks that we can consider, no? So it's very important to ensure that we create this kind of a framework, address the action plans, determine where you're at today and where you want to be, and how you're going to get there is really one of the most important things that the organization needs to do. If your organization doesn't have a corporate governance for risk management, risk assessment, um, now's the time to really jump on that and create that governance, put that governance in place, and ensure that you learn from the current situation and leverage the current situation in order to do better in terms of managing your risk for the future. As we have completed, or as we think of that risk assessment, risk modeling, and complete that exercise, it's also good to begin to look at how do we take that and then now think towards the future. I know about a little less than 50% of the population is planning for the future. So as you plan for the future, here's a bit of an exercise that we think might be able to help you. We use this kind of a framework with a number of our clients. So number one is to confirm your objectives. Yeah, return to work is an obvious objective, but we're going to challenge your return to work mindset. And the question we want to pose is, what does return to work mean for you? Is it 100% on site? Is this the new normal for you, such that you will have a hybrid, maybe a percentage that will be on site and another percentage that will continuously work from home? Or will you have a varying scenario where maybe it's part-time on site and then part-time work from home? So what is the objective of the whole exercise in terms of return to work? And not just determining the population who'll be on site or at home, but also what's a short-term and long-term objective that you want to achieve in your return to work plan and its strategy. Are there cost implications if you need to buy equipment, as Doc Andrew had shared earlier, some examples in terms of equipment to protect the staff that might be part of your short-term objective. And then how do you scale up to ensure that if this pandemic goes on much longer, how does the organization plan for that? So it's very important to plan and break out your post-planning objectives into short-term goals and long-term goals. Part of the plan should also include looking at different alternatives to address each objective. So this is where we recommend that you really become more granular in terms of the planning exercise and the brainstorming to look at all the possible options, all the possible actions that the organization can take, and then to look at impacts that can be had in terms of each alternative option. Developing action plans is very important to ensure as well that there is a high level of accountability and ownership. Don't just name an action plan and say, oh, this belongs to HR or this belongs to admin or facilities, but really name the individuals who are owners of key action plans, because at the end of the day, they will be the ones to ensure that these action plans are executed, also within very strict timelines and parameters. And then finally, in developing your post-quarantine plan, ensure that your change management communication is in place and that there is a significant amount of clarity for your employee population. Okay, we'll take another poll. We like audience participation. We want to hear from you. So I'm going to request the PMAP team to help out with this other poll. Thank you. So we'll take, I know it's a bit of a longer question, so maybe we'll take about 30 to 60 seconds here. So what are your challenges in creating a return to work plan post the quarantine period? So not just post ECQ, let's make that general, since I know some parts of Cebu are in ECQ, some parts of Cebu are GCQ. So let's make that general. So what are your challenges in creating a return to work plan post the quarantine period? Don't know where to begin. And again, no right or wrong answers. Feel free to just, answer the first thought that comes to mind. No time, attention is still on day-to-day BCP, and that's okay. Waiting for regional or corporate office, if you're a multinational organization or a regional arm, that might be the case. And then other reasons, unfortunately, we don't have free text to capture other reasons, but so we'll take a few more minutes, few more seconds to hear your answers. Okay. Maybe 10 more seconds. Only half have replied. Maybe we'll give it another 10 to 15 seconds. Only about 58% have voted. We'd love to hear from you. So don't worry, we are not publicizing who said what. This is purely aggregated and anonymized. If you say you don't know, that's fine. We just would like to hear where our participants are at this time. Okay, our numbers seem to be improving with 67% already voting. Maybe last 5 seconds. Okay. And shall we close the voting now? So we have close to 75% who have voted. Thank you very much. And so it's interesting that 31% of our participants don't know where to begin. And that's okay. Like I said, who has experienced this kind of a magnitude of a crisis before? Not even in first world countries, right? That's why we always hear everybody saying it's quite unprecedented that this crisis is really affecting the world. So I think it's very interesting that we don't know where to begin. And 31% of you said that. So hopefully, through this session, Doc and I are able to impart, what knowledge we have and what experience we have in helping some of our clients. And maybe there are some takeaways that you have from today's session. No time. 9% said they have no time to think of post ECQ return to work plan. Still working on BCP, and that's again perfectly fine. I'll tell you a story. We did a similar kind of a webinar with a BPO organization in Manila, and we run the same question. Later on, we had the chance to speak to some of those participants, and when we further drilled down on why they say they have no time and attention is still on BCP, it's interesting, sorry, not just BPO, but even manufacturing. So it's interesting that because throughout ECQ in Manila, manufacturing and BPOs were operational for as long as their workers were housed within the same facility, or if their residence is within a 1 to 2 kilometer radius to their center, or if some of them might be housed in some kind of apartment or hotel nearby. And when we asked the question and we heard them say attention is still on BCP, and we asked why is that? What are you doing with BCP? It's been 2 months. We've been doing this since mid-March. We've been in quarantine. And what we gathered from them is that every day there's something new, whether it's managing disciplinary sanction of employees who are violating rules of the hotel, or attendance issues, or employee arguments, issues, and whatnot. But the other interesting thing in managing BCP is they're continuously, for the BPO and IT-enabled organizations, they're continuing to purchase laptops, computers, continuing to set up people at home to improve the percentage of people that are working from home and to minimize the people who are working on site. So that's partly what they're doing in managing BCP. And same thing for manufacturing firms. Some of them are saying, of course, there's no work from home, they need to work on site. But they're managing a lot of the supply chain related matters and issues, whether it be parts not being delivered. And so that's also part of their BCP. So it's interesting how there's so many different priorities that different organizations have. And up until today, in spite of being on quarantine for, a little over 2 months now, still many HR practitioners are concentrating on BCP. So it's really difficult to do BCP management day to day and then still augment that with needing to think of the future and planning for return to work. But that's why it's really important to collaborate with your leadership team as well, because there may be others in the team. So it's not just HR that is burdened with such initiatives. Waiting for corporates, about 37% waiting for a regional or corporate office to create one. Just be cognizant of and be mindful of what your corporate might create or regional office might create. We need to ensure that that is localized because, of course, in a local setting, there might be certain nuances that people from far away might have not thought about. And that's the role that HR plays in such an exercise. Okay, so we'll stop sharing the poll. Thank you. And let's just go back to the presentation. So as we prepare, so hopefully this is one slide for those who say we don't know where to begin. This is one slide that I thought might be helpful. There are many other hexagons we can create to show the different pillars as we think of return to work, but we just thought of capturing some critical ones, at least for today's discussion. So protecting the workforce is top and foremost priority. And these are some questions you can ask. Of course, we can come up with many, many more questions, but just top of mind, these are the ones that are commonly asked. So will you be testing or not? I will save the answer later for Doc Andrew because we're going to invite him back in to talk about testing. But that should be part of what you're thinking of. And what about protective equipment? To what extent will the organization provide that? How will you configure your workspace? In our offices, we've already configured our pantry so that it's one chair per table and really creating the social distancing. So how will you configure your workspace in your pantries, et cetera, et cetera? And then in terms of production, what percentage will you be expecting 100% day one? Or would it be gradually scaling up? Or will you have a hybrid, as I had described earlier, where only a percentage critical to be on site will be invited to come back in and the rest will remain at home? So there are many different models and solutions that you can come up with. And all of these are really unique to your organization. Changing roles. So it's interesting that perhaps you never had, as I mentioned earlier, a risk manager before. So think about that as one possible role. Maybe a workforce planner, workforce capacity planner. If you don't have such a role in some of your industries, I know that's more common also for BPOs and manufacturing, but perhaps something to think about. And then other roles in the future as a result of the current crisis. And then pay. Some of you might have already instituted hazard pay, especially for those who are working through the quarantine period. If you're also in essential business like hospitals and food industry, so maybe some have already started to offer adjusting with the hazard pay and whatnot. But what about incentives in the future? What will that look like, and how will that all change? So there are many different questions and different pillars that you can think of as you think of return to work. So everyone says this is probably the new normal. Many years ago we would, and in HR, you've heard this quite often, the future of work. We've heard the future of work to be about digitalization, disruption, transformation. Well, the future of work is now. There's no future. It's now. It's happening now. What we do, what is currently going on, has had a massive impact on the way we pay people, the way we attract talent, the way we work, the way we develop our people, et cetera, et cetera. So how do we apply that future of work mentality to now, to the here and now? So imagine day one post-quarantine, only X% of your workforce is at the office. And again, need to determine what does that look like in terms of population. How will it change, not just the percentage of people who report to work, but how do you then measure productivity at home for your at-home workers and for your on-site workers? Are the KPIs the same? Will there be an adjustment in your KPIs or your goals? How are the policies changing in the future? You might be very strict in terms of your policies. There's no grace period, or you need to clock in a certain time, et cetera, et cetera. So with the current setup, the new normal, how are these things changing? Policies, incentives, goals and objectives or KPIs, even your schedules. What work patterns will there be? Maybe you're just a full-time employer now. Will you think of even part-time employment to help beef up your team if it's necessary? And then even in terms of scheduling, we know some organizations that have a flexible work arrangement already applied to avoid doing furloughs or floating their employees and or temporarily suspending work. So some have already applied compressed work week and reduced pay. So is that the new norm as well as we think post-quarantine? So think of supply and demand as well. If you used to be face-to-face with conducting interviews, how do you trust the system now where it's all, whether online, virtual, etc.? And even your future meetings, if you weren't tech savvy before, perhaps your organization wasn't so into technology, how would that change in the future? So a lot of things, future, but again, the future is now, and it's really important to think of these things and address them today. Finally, we deal with health solutions quite often with our clients. And whenever we talk about well-being, in the past, it's always parked. It's always participation is a challenge, budget is a challenge. When we talk about mental health, even with the introduction of the mental health law, we're helping organizations to be compliant with the law by creating different programs for them. All of a sudden, as a result of the pandemic, a lot of these things have been beefed up and put as number one priority to safeguard and protect their employees. So think of that it will become one of the value adding criteria as new talent also considers your organization. It's an employee value proposition now that is becoming even stronger than ever in the past. Further assessment or further looking at the workforce. So as throughout your planning, besides determining how the new norm will look in terms of managing the work from home versus on-site, also think of how you will coordinate with your building admin. What are the rules that they have? Are you only going to allow people who have vehicles or shuttle some of your employees to work? Those who are commuters perhaps remain work from home to minimize the risk exposure to the COVID virus. So those are some considerations as well. Will there be a self-assessment, or will it be a survey that you conduct every day to determine the risk exposure of your employees? Results of the self-assessment might be a certain set of findings on one day, and on the next day it might be totally different. And then finally, even how you conduct meetings, travel, your pantry, as I used an example earlier, how would that change? I'm gonna, in the interest of time, speed up a bit. So I'm gonna turn it back to Doc Andro. This is a very intriguing topic, so I want him to have a little bit more time. Doc, to test or not to test? That is the question.
I don't know if we have enough time to touch this one, but it is a really long topic. But nevertheless, I think there's an answer now. The DOHS released an iteration of the interim guidelines on return to work regarding testing. So it categorically states that testing is not a requirement for return to work because of and more so on the rapid testing, it's there are certain limitations as to specificity and sensitivity. There are quite significant cases of false positive and false negative, and of course we would cling on the daily monitoring, health risk management rather than on testing. I think the next two slides would be just a wrap up. Chris, kindly. So we'll go back to basic. The dictum is you treat yourself and your seatmate in the office or your coworker as a symptomatic carrier. So daily reporting and tracking is important. So physical distancing, wearing masks, and hand washing is equally important. And of course, you have to educate and communicate and engage your employees. So bottom line is that we have to have our employees ready, agile, and resilient to all these changes. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Doc Andro and Miss Chris, no, for those very interesting updates. No, we have a lot of questions already here, so maybe let's start the ball rolling. So, Doc Andrew, I understand that your wife is also a frontliner. No, she is an obstetrician, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So with this, Doc Andrew, there are questions with regards to a second wave, based on the experience of some of other countries. So what really is a second wave?
I think Secretary Duque, I think, backtrack on his pronouncement that there's already a second wave. But another epidemiologist is saying that we are already on the second wave. The first wave was that the first 3 cases that we had during first week of March, and afterwards there's a lull of around 1 month, and according to that epidemiologist, that's the second wave. But really, a first wave is there's a significant upsurge of cases, and for another wave to occur, there must be a lull or something like diminution of confirmed cases. Then afterwards, would be already a secondary upsurge. But it is if we will not be able to handle this GCQ, and eventually if community quarantine will be lifted, and we will not observe this hand washing, physical distancing, and wearing masks, uh, obviously there will be increased transmission. But secondarily, we would a seemingly a increase in cases can also be attributed to increase in testing. If we continue to hit our targets of like a 30,000 per day, testing all those suspected cases, then the reporting for confirmed cases will eventually rise. But it can be a combination of those factors, but eventually it will boil down to what is the fatality rate, what is the proportion that recovers, what is the proportion that died, and that would be really crucial. And flattening the curve is crucial. During the lull, we are having our frontliners really breathe, and hopefully there will be no second wave, so that they will not be back on their wall.
Okay, thank you, Doc Andrew. No, so just to remind everyone that we are extending our session. No, so we are extending it up to 3:15. So to accommodate your questions. So thank you. We have a question here from Ma'am Chris. Ma'am Chris, this is about soft skills. What do you think are the soft skills that the young generation of our country must strengthen or start to develop, especially in the light of post-quarantine or post-pandemic? And then it's with a follow-up question for those who are in educational institution, what learning activities do you believe will help develop these skills?
Thank you for the question. I think agility is very important, especially for not just younger people, but in general. In this new normal, agility, adaptability, flexibility, very, very important. And agility is really the ability of an individual to not just be able to move quickly on things, but be able to adapt to the current situation and overcome whatever challenges they might have, right? The ability to bounce back quickly. And that's why we also stress the importance of, overall well-being, because that overall impacts one's ability to be agile and to think quickly, to be spontaneous, and the ability to think on their feet. In light of the current situation and the new normal or the new ways of doing things, one of the other things that we find very important is executive presence. For HR leaders, the way you present face to face, you're always being evaluated even more on a webinar or in a virtual meeting. I think there's more criticism in a virtual meeting than there is face to face. So that executive presence is very important, and the manner by which you communicate, whether with peers, with clients, if you're facing clients, with vendors, or even up and down the organization, is very, very important. Both in writing and even more so in presenting. In terms of learning, distance learning, we've all heard about distance learning, virtual learning, that it's a new in thing. Almost every day there's a webinar here and there being offered. I think the biggest advice we can offer is that if your schedule can permit it, leverage all of those that you can, and diversify the topics, especially if you know that it is an opportunity area for you. Skill building types of webinars and distance learning is very important. And if there are no webinars available, look for it online. There are so many free platforms internationally, globally, that are offering a lot of courses. And now is the opportunity to really look at oneself and be honest and be humble to identify skills that we need to further improve on, and then match those with courses, online courses that are available to help improve ourselves.
Okay, thank you so much, Ms. Chris. So just a few questions, no, before we wrap up. Doc Andrew and Ms. Chris can answer this question. Do you believe that prioritizing human resources really does pay off in the long term?
I don't know. Chris will obviously say yes. Me as a medical person, of course, as a corporate man, I really appreciate the role that HR is into in an organization. But maybe I would say that along with HR, now is the time that the Occupational Safety and Health Committee, together with HR, should work hand in hand. Maybe it's a blessing for us that a year ago, our government has passed that strengthening the occupational safety and health law, and also the mental health law. This should help us in order to bounce back. And whether you are a member of the Occupational Safety and Health Committee or the Mental Health Committee or any other committees, obviously HR has a step up as the captain of the ship, and of course all the stakeholders should be in their role in order to really be resilient in our fight against this COVID-19. That's all.
Okay, thank you, Doc Andrew. How about Ms. Chris, your take
Um,
on the question?
so of course, my take is a bit biased, being an HR practitioner all my life. HR plays a very, very critical piece, a very critical part in the organization. All facets of HR, whether it be talent acquisition, development, the rewards, etc., etc. So essentially, all facets play a critical role in the organization. How you use HR, how you practice being an HR practitioner, depends on really the manner by which you step up. I know a lot of people who don't have a full understanding of HR only think of the administrative part of it, my pay, my benefits, if I want a loan, etc. So very admin centric. But we need to step up as HR practitioners and really be a true business partner. And what a true business partner means is looking not just at people and the impact of many different facets to our people, but also looking at broadening and having strong business acumen. So, what is the impact of people and the volatility of the current environment to the business? And really having conversations like that with leadership and with people within the organization, because that's the way to understand that HR is really a true business partner if you're able to speak the lingo of the business. So, I think for HR to remain valuable, we need to step up and ensure all the time, whether crisis mode, no crisis mode, that we're able to speak the language of our leaders and the language of the business from a business and financial point of view as well.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Andrew Sandoval and Ms. Chris Rosenthal, no, from AON, for sharing your expertise with us to our membership. So thank you so much, Doc and Ms. Chris. We really appreciate it. And on behalf of the officers and the staff of PMAP Cebu, we'd like to extend our gratitude to both of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you as well on behalf of AON. Thank you for having us.
Thank you too.
Okay, so there you have it, friends. Dr. Andrew Sandoval, Medical Director of AON, and Ms. Chris Rosenthal, Strategic Accounts Leader for AON, no, who just shared with us the best practices in terms of crisis management and the preparations for post-quarantine. So thank you to all our 113 participants who are here. We had around 24, 25 YouTube viewers a while ago. So thank you so much. To formally close this webinar, may we call on PMAP Cebu President, President Grace Iligan, PhD.
much on behalf of PMAP Cebu. Thank you so much, everyone. A pleasant afternoon.
Okay, so thank you so much for again joining us in this afternoon's webinar, crisis managements and preparations for post-quarantine. We'd like to request all the panelists to please stay behind for our group photo. So thank you so much, President Grace Iligan, for giving us your quick closing message. No? And of course, our participants who joined us a while ago. So we really learned a lot, and it was such a pleasure um, to co-sponsor, to co-organize this webinar with IntelliCare and AON. So thank you so much for joining us. And also our YouTube viewers, thank you so much for viewing our live stream. So again, we'd like to request all our panelists to please stay behind for our group photo. Thank you for joining us and being with us until uh, the end of the webinar.
Miss O, you may stop the video now. Miss O, you may stop the video now.